Child labor in the United States. In this lesson, you will interpret a visual primary source of child laborers to recognize working conditions. You will use the information to support an amendment to regulate child labor. As factories spread throughout the United States, so did the practice of child labor, or in other words, using children as workers. By 1890, 1 million children had jobs. In the South, most child laborers worked in textile mills where cotton was made into cloth. In Chicago, many children worked in the meatpacking industry. In New York, they worked in the garment industry. By 1900, more than 1.7 million Americans under 16 years of age had jobs. Child labor was not a new idea. Learning from skilled masters was a common practice in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. It was still the way young people learned a trade in Europe when American colonies were founded. During colonial times, many children were working as apprentices by the time they were 12 years old. An apprentice is someone who learns a trade or skill from an expert called a master. Apprentices learn how to make clothing from master tailors. They learned how to make shoes from master cobblers. Hat makers, blacksmiths, silversmiths, and other skilled business people all trained apprentices. Apprentices worked long, hard days. Being an apprentice was an opportunity for a boy to get ahead. Girls, on the other hand, rarely had the chance to become an apprentice. Factory owners in the 1800s had jobs that needed little or no training. A 10-year-old child could often handle the work. In fact, some factory owners hired only children. They claimed that children could do certain jobs better than adults. Children ran errands, helped machine operators, and cleaned. Factory owners also paid children less than adults. Unskilled adult workers made about 1 dime per hour, which came to $1 for a 10-hour day. Children worked for as little as 50 cents a day. By the mid-1800s, many states had free public schools. In 1850, nearly 3.3 million children went to elementary schools. Most parents wanted their children to go to school, but because factory jobs paid adults so little, some parents needed their children to work too. Before 1900, most workers made only about $400 to $500 per year, yet the basic cost of living was about $600. Many parents could not pay their family's living expenses without the money their children earned. They could not afford to let the children go to school. Children worked in factories, but they also worked in other places. Some worked in coal mines, others worked in country stables, some worked in city sidewalks selling newspapers or shining shoes. Many children still worked on farms. They harvested berries, tobacco, sugar beets, and other vegetables. However, children in factories and mines worked under the most dangerous and unhealthy conditions. In paint factories, child workers breathed in toxic fumes. In the garment industry, young laborers hunched over sewing machines and developed curved spines. In coal mines, boys as young as 9 years old inhaled coal dust all day. People who work to change things for the better are called reformers. In the 1890s and early 1900s, many Americans worked hard to improve the lives of children. These reformers wanted laws that set a minimum working age. They also wanted to limit the number of hours children could work. They felt children should be kept out of dangerous jobs. Most reformers believed that every child should have the chance to go to school. Reformers worked to make people aware of the conditions that children faced in the workplace. Some reformers created the National Child Labor Committee. This group hired people to investigate factories and mines. One of these investigators was Lewis Hine. He wrote about the children he met and took photos of them at work. Factory owners hired guards to keep Hine away. The owners did not want anyone to take photos of their workers. They were afraid to let people see what conditions were like, but Hine found ways to get inside the factories. He often disguised himself as a Bible salesman or a fire inspector. Sometimes he pretended to be a photographer, eager to take pictures of the latest machines. He always kept his notebook hidden in a pocket. He used his notes to write many articles. His photographs, however, were more powerful than any words he wrote. Several states passed laws to protect children as the result of the work of Hine and others. For example, the Illinois Factory Act of 1893 stopped employers from hiring children under 14 to work more than 8 hours a day. By 1914, every state but one had child labor laws with a minimum age limit. The age was 12 in several states in the South, 15 in South Dakota, and 16 in Montana. Most laws also banned children from working until they were literate, which means they could read and write. Often, states failed to enforce their laws. As a result, many Americans demanded a national law that the United States government and its federal agents would enforce. Business people across the nation disapproved of any such law. Several times, Congress passed child labor laws, but the Supreme Court ruled them unconstitutional. In 1925, reformers even proposed a constitutional amendment that would limit child labor. However, the amendment failed to win enough support. Finally, in 1938, Congress passed a national child labor law. The law made it illegal for most businesses to hire children under the age of 16. Children under the age of 18 could not work at dangerous jobs. But the law failed to protect all children. For example, it did not include farm workers. It also failed to stop child labor during World War II, when the adults left their jobs to join the armed forces. States ignored the law and allowed young teenagers to work long hours.